Tonight, one of the country's richest and most influential business leaders questions recent government policy on migration. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire Manchester United owner and one-time Labour backer, reveals his controversial opinion to Sky News.
The UK is being colonised. It's costing too much money. It will cause...
colonised?
It'll cause... Well, the UK is being colonised by immigrants.
Also tonight, after fending off a challenge from within, Keir Starmer faces down his opponents in the Commons, who again question his judgment over Peter Mandelson and Matthew Doyle.
We weren't the ones stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists.
The catastrophic lack of judgment.
The most gullible former director of public prosecutions in history.
The PM also tried to address concerns of Labour women in Parliament. We'll hear from the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Plus, Nigel Farage's partner reckons people don't want political spouses involved in politics, and she'd rather listen to waves and seagulls. Does she have a point? I can't promise you peace and quiet tonight. I'll be discussing all that and more, though, with Andrew Fisher and Daisy McAndrew, who'll be with us for the next hour. It is Wednesday. I'm Matt Barbet, live from Westminster. This is the Politics Hub. Good evening, good to have you with us. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the co-owner of Manchester United and one of the country's wealthiest people, has given Sky News his controversial views on the migration debate, telling us the UK has been colonised by immigrants who are costing the country too much money, he thinks. The 79-year-old billionaire lives mainly in Monaco, but backed Labour at the last election and in recent months has been courted by Reform UK. In another blow to the Prime Minister, the founder of the chemicals giant Ineos suggested Sir Keir Starmer is possibly the wrong person to lead the country, as he may be too nice. Have a listen to what he told our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
If you really want to deal with the major issues of immigration, with people opting to take benefits rather than working for a living, if you want to deal with that, then you're going to have to do some things which are unpopular and show some courage.
And has this government done that?
No, I think they I don't know whether it's just the apparatus that hasn't allowed Keir to do it, or he's maybe too nice. He's a nice. I mean, I know Keir. He's a nice man. I like him, but it's a tough job, and I think you have to do some difficult things with the UK to get it back on track, because at the moment, I don't think the economy is in a good... You can't afford... you can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK is being colonised. It's costing too much money. It will cause...
It's been colonised?
It'll cause... Well, the UK is being colonised by immigrants, really, isn't it? I mean, the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020. Now it's 70 million.
Have
That's 12 million people.
You met recently with Nigel Farage, didn't you?
I did.
Do you think that they would be a good government if they were to win the next election?
I think Nigel is an intelligent man, and I think he's got good intentions, but in a way you could say exactly the same about Keir when Keir came in. But, I think it needs somebody who's prepared to be unpopular for a period of time to get the big issues sorted out, would be my view.
Ed has these thoughts on that interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
Really extraordinary choice of words from Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Worth just saying, first of all, he talked about in the year 2020, he said the population was 58 million. That's wrong. It was 67 million in 2020. It's got up by about 3 million or 4 million or so since then. 58 million was probably, he was talking probably about 2000, so the turn of the millennium. But nonetheless, the choice of language is inflammatory, to say the least, the idea of the UK being colonised. But more to the point, I mean, it's that overarching thing that clearly he is not happy with the government. He believes that more difficult decisions need to be taken. He believes that that's the model that he's chosen at Manchester United, taking difficult decisions, making him unpopular. He knows that he's unpopular in charge of Manchester United. And what's striking too, I mean, this was not the topic that we came to Antwerp to talk about. We came to talk about the fact that the chemical sector across Europe, including the UK, is facing a serious crisis right now. And that is the intervention that I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe would have wanted to have made. But these outspoken thoughts about the state of immigration and the economy more broadly in the UK are doubtless the ones that people will be talking about.
Well, I also got reaction to that interview by Ed with the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Jim Ratcliffe, as I'm sure you know, is one of the most prominent business people in the UK, billionaire, co-owner of Manchester United, made his money in industry, and has been telling us today that he thinks Britain has been colonised by immigrants. He says, actually, you can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two issues there. One is about the numbers of people coming into the UK through the immigration routes, and the other is the number of people on benefits. I'm always very conscious in any discussion about benefits that there will be people who desperately need the support of the welfare state who will be very, very worried hearing anything other than that they will always have the support and protection they need if they need it. But I think he is right to say that there are too many people who we've written off, not allowed to make the contribution that they could make to this country. And we are particularly concerned about that as a government, especially when it comes to young people. We've got far too many young people who go into the benefits system at a very early age and never come out. And that is such a waste of lives and opportunity. And that's why we're investing in them to try and turn that around. When it comes to immigration, I think that people deserve an immigration system that they can trust. I think most people are very compassionate, and where people need safety and security, they expect Britain to play our part. And we'll give a warm welcome to people who need to be here. I think when it comes to immigration more generally, though, one of the biggest challenges that we've had is not just the chaos and the uncontrolled immigration and the sheer numbers that we saw rising to their peak under the Boris Johnson government and under the last Conservative government. It's also that people want to see that when people are coming here to work and making a contribution, that they're not doing that at the expense of governments that aren't prepared to invest in young people in communities to be able to get those good jobs and those opportunities. So we've got to match up the skills that we have in this country and make sure we're investing in that, not just relying on migration from overseas in order to fill those jobs when our young people can't get them. And that's where I think the link is, and that's where I think it becomes really dangerous.
Isn't it a huge problem? Isn't it a dangerous problem? You have one of the wealthiest, most successful individuals here with this perception of what you are or what you're not doing as a government.
Well, I think we are doing it, and I'd be more than happy to speak to him about what we're doing.
But is it a problem that he has the perception? He'll be vocalising the perception of millions of people potentially with that.
Well, I don't think it's any secret in this country that too many people think that
are on benefits.
That we've written off a whole generation of people. We've got older people who came out of work during COVID who never got back in, and we've got far too many young people. We've got 1 million young people in this country not in any kind of employment, education or training. That is a tragedy and a waste, and it's completely unsustainable.
Why then did the Parliamentary Labour Party fail to back the government's measures to change the welfare state?
Well, I think the Parliamentary Labour Party actually made a valid point, which is that we had instigated a review of this system and the changes that we needed to make sure that people didn't have to spend their entire lives on benefits, could come off the benefits and get into work. And we brought forward those reforms before that review was completed. I think they're right to say, hang on a minute, we want to see this done well and we want to see it done properly. And I think as a government, when people raise concerns and objections, you should listen. Doesn't mean you'll always agree, and there are several things on which we've been challenged repeatedly, and we've chosen to do them anyway because we think they are in the interests of the country. But where people raise valid concerns and objections, I think we should listen and we should respond accordingly.
He's made his money and has success here. Nevertheless, he does live in Monaco. Does that give him the right to say what should happen in the UK? Well,
look, it's up to Sky how much prominence you want to give him. I think everybody's got the right to voice their opinion. But as a government, we have the right to push back where we think people are getting it wrong. And I think this country has many challenges, one of which is we haven't invested in the skills of young people growing up for a very long time so that they can get those really great jobs. In many sectors, we are just reliant every year on bringing people in from outside. My dad comes from an immigrant background. I want your viewers to know that I'm really proud that Britain is a diverse and tolerant country that is strengthened by waves of immigration. But you can't have a system where we're taking talent away from other countries because successive governments haven't been bothered to invest in our own young people, and we are turning that around.
We'll have more of my interview with Lisa Nandy later in the hour. She's responding to questions there about Keir Starmer. And we'll also bring in Andrew Fisher, Labour Party Director of Policy, former Labour Party Director of Policy, and also journalist and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew. Right now, though, we're going to head to Canada, where the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is talking about that shooting today in British Columbia.
Lives have been forever changed.
I want to express my profound gratitude to the first responders, the RCMP officers who entered immediately that school, not knowing what awaited them, to the paramedics and medical staff at the Tumbler Ridge Health Center, to the teachers and the school staff who acted with extraordinary courage to protect the children in their care. In the darkest of moments, they showed the best of our country. I have spoken with Premier Eby to express my condolences and those of the Government of Canada. The Minister of Public Safety has been coordinating the federal response and is en route to Tumbler Ridge with the Premier and Minister Robertson. The MP, Bob Zimmer, is already there. Our officials are in close contact with their provincial and local counterparts to ensure that the community receives every support that we can provide now and in the weeks and months ahead. Mr. Speaker, we have been here before. École Polytechnique in Montreal, the Islamic Cultural Centre of Quebec City, La Loche, Saskatchewan, Humboldt, Saskatchewan, Potepic, Nova Scotia. Each time, it breaks us open. Each time, Canadians show who we are. Mr. Speaker, in the days ahead, there'll be important questions to ask, difficult conversations to have. We owe that to the victims and their families. But now, it's time for grieving and remembrance. Now is for the people of Tumbler Ridge and the Peace River region, for a community that is enduring the unimaginable. Il y a quelques instants, Monsieur le Président, nous avons tenu un moment décisif.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney reacting to a very difficult day for the country after that shooting at a school and a nearby home in Tumbler Ridge in British Columbia. 9 people died there, 25 were injured as well. Let's return to our top story this evening, that interview given by Jim Ratcliffe to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. Here to discuss it, the former Labour Party Director of Policy, Andrew Fisher, and journalist and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew. It's good to have you both with us. Andrew, to you first. Is it a problem having such a prominent, wealthy, successful individual like Jim Ratcliffe, part owner of Manchester United, having that view of how the government is, in his opinion, not tackling the issues of immigration and the welfare state?
Well, he's ignorant of both, isn't he? And is he successful? He's got lots of money. He's a billionaire. Does that make him successful?
But it does employ a lot of people as well.
He sacked a lot of people as well. He closed down Grangemouth and put them all on benefits. So if he's talking about people on benefits, you know, he better not lay off British workers. And if he was interested in that, he would pay his taxes here rather than moving to Monaco and living in a tax haven. In 2010, he moved INEOS's headquarters from Hampshire abroad to avoid tax, I think to Switzerland. So I don't think he's got a very good record to start speaking on these issues himself when he doesn't pay his way in society. We've had waves of migration to this country, and all the statistics show, overall, migrants are a net economic benefit to this country. Now, for him to start attacking that, I mean, with completely incorrect figures, which I'm glad you corrected, is appalling, really. It's just whipping up division at a time when actually we need to be bringing people together. So, no, I think he's just displayed his own ignorance of things and just shows just because you've got a lot of money doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, frankly.
He's got homes in lots of places, by the way. He may have a home in Monaco. We don't know if he's domiciled there, probably.
He did move his residency.
He would probably argue that he still pays a certain amount of tax here via his companies. Daisy, what do you think?
I think that Andrew's reaction is going to be the reaction of a lot of Labour Party supporters, and I thought it was very interesting that wasn't Lisa Nandy's reaction. You would imagine Lisa Nandy and Andrew to have very similar outlook on this, and I think
you wouldn't.
Well, okay. Well, you would imagine Labour supporters, the same broad church, but I think it's fascinating from political observation point of view to see the way that Lisa Nandy responded to your questions, which was much, much more emollient and much more sort of pro-Jim Ratcliffe than you would have imagined. And, of course, that is the situation that the Labour government is in. They know that Jim Ratcliffe is talking for a certain number of people, and he is talking about politics that people are very concerned about, which is why reform is on the up, and that's what all political parties, but particularly the government, very, very concerned about. So I thought it was interesting how Lisa Nandy pulled her punches in answer to you. I mean, I'm not a particular fan of I'm certainly not a fan of the language that Jim Ratcliffe used. And, he strikes me as the sort of Alan Rickman of sort of business people, because he sort of almost loves to be disliked.
Doesn't look dissimilar to Alan Rickman in some places.
He reminds me of him in that sort of cartoon, we were saying, a bit pantomime-y, baddie kind of way. And he obviously, he's almost Millwall, not Manchester United. Everyone hates me and I don't care, seems to be his attitude. But he does speak for people, and he speaks about an issue that is very, very important politically.
Thank you for the moment. It has been a tumultuous few days, of course, for the Prime Minister, with his political survival really put to the test. Today, Sir Keir Starmer came out swinging again at PMQs, but was attacked by opposition leaders who accused him of not taking enough responsibility. There were questions, too, about disquiet among women in the Labour Party. The PM headed from the Commons, in fact, to a meeting of his female MPs and peers to try to quell concerns they might have. I'll have more on that a bit later. But first, here is what happened at Prime Minister's questions.
The Prime Minister, sometimes likes to claim, as he just did, that he cares about violence against women. The truth is, he only cares about the victims when he's trying to save his own skin. They can shake their heads. We saw it with grooming gangs. We saw it with Mandelson. And now we see it with Doyle. Isn't that what a former prosecutor would call an established pattern of behaviour?
I'm going to take no lectures from the Tories in standards in public life. She defended Partygate for months and months and months. And even now she says it was overblown.
Nobody buys it, Mr. Speaker. Not even the Labour women, because they know he always puts the Downing Street Boys Club first. And how dare he criticise us? We weren't the ones stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists. The Prime Minister is now telling everyone that he's never lost a fight. It's because he won't step into the ring. He's never lost a fight. He's walked away from welfare reform. He won't stand up to the unions. He won't stand up to China. He can't even stand up to Mauritius. He's had, Mr. Speaker, he's had 3 cabinet secretaries, 4 chiefs of staff, 5 director of communications in just 18 months.
She talks about numbers. Let us remember, Mr. Speaker, 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 8 home secretaries, 8 foreign secretaries, 16 housing secretaries, all completely useless, all failed Britain, and this Prime Minister's clearing up the mess.
If I've just listened to the Prime Minister correctly, he's essentially rolled the same pitch in relation to Matthew Doyle as he did with Peter Mandelson, that they weren't clear with him. He appears to be the most gullible former Director of Public Prosecutions in history. But he has a slight problem, Mr. Speaker, because some of us do read the newspapers.
He says he reads the newspapers. He'll have read that at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital we see one of the worst failures in Scottish public life. Vulnerable children and adults put at risk. Evidence of serious warnings to the SNP government were ignored. He should have been looking at those, not looking at the newspapers. To appoint one paedophile supporter cannot be excused as misfortune. To appoint 2 shows a catastrophic lack of judgment. The Right Honourable Gentleman once told this House that when a Prime Minister refuses to take responsibility, and I quote,
It only serves to convince people that things cannot get better, that governments cannot improve people's lives, and that progress is not possible because politics does not work.
Millions of people have been let down for years and years and years. And one of the reasons was austerity, which his party supported. He should take accountability and take responsibility for what he has inflicted on this country.
I think I touched a raw nerve.
Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here. And I think Ed Davey has a point there. It seemed like he touched a nerve because it got pretty spicy from the PM there.
It was fiery today, and yeah, that was the bit I enjoyed when Ed Davey said, I've touched a raw nerve there, and he clearly had. I mean, the Prime Minister really did. You said earlier on that he came out swinging. At one point, he had a real go at Priti Patel over the bullying accusations of a few years ago. And then, of course, he rattled off all those, the number of ministers who've served in various posts. And then normally he's quite friendly with Ed Davey at Prime Minister's questions. But, of course, he referred to the time when Ed Davey was a minister in the coalition government under David Cameron and George Osborne was Chancellor, the age of austerity. And we saw there Stephen Flynn also waving a piece of paper. Yeah. Now, it was a letter, I think, that he'd received from, I think, the House of Lords Appointments Commission, or one of those bodies in the Lords, when he wrote, taking up the case, the complaint about Matthew Doyle. Now, as was referred to in Prime Minister's questions today, this story first appeared on the front page of the Sunday Times on the 27th of December. And, of course, there was a lot of talk about how the Prime Minister, it was no great secret because it had been on the front page of the Sunday Times. I do wonder, though, did Kemi Badenoch really hit the right target there? I mean, are they really saying in the pub this evening, oh, scandal about Matthew Doyle? I mean, to use the old joke, I'm not sure he's even a household name in his own home. I mean, everybody's heard of Peter Mandelson, but I'm not sure they've heard of Matthew Doyle. Would she not have been better by going on about the plotting by West Streeting and Anna Sarwar and all that, and the Prime Minister's precarious position? You can see why Stephen Flynn went on Matthew Doyle, because he's made that his issue. He has. And, of course, I think Ed Davey also mentioned the Hillsborough law as well. I think he said something like, you said it was going to be one of the first things you did, make sure it's one of the last things you do. That was quite a good line. So I thought it was pretty spicy, lively PMQs. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I can tell. I think it was a bit spicy. Let's see what Andrew and Daisy think. Daisy? I just think, picking up on what John was saying on whether Kemi Badenoch was right or wrong to go for Matthew Doyle, and yes, of course, you know, we all know who Matthew Doyle is. He's been around in politics. More people probably do know this. Yes, exactly. He's been around in politics, you know, since the 1990s, and you know he's been one of those backroom figures. And a lot of journalists don't particularly like him. So I think that's another reason why people. Well, I think because he's one of those people that's had to tell off journalists throughout the years. So you get a history, and so of course people like to stick the knife in. I'm afraid to say in these internal Westminster things. I think I see why Badenoch did it though, because to lose one peer with some sort of paedophile connection is pretty awful. To lose two in quick succession. You can start to build a story about how there's a theme there and how terrible Keir Starmer's judgment is and so on. So I understand why she went on it. Timing's everything, Andrew, isn't it? I think the Matthew Doyle story on its own wouldn't get this attention, but coming hot on the heels of Peter Mandelson, then here we are. Yeah, look, of course it's right that the media have covered it and that it's raised questions about his judgment, but I think saying she stuffed the government with paedophile apologists, I think it just cheapens. I mean, I don't like PMQs anyway, sorry, John, but it does trivialise politics a lot of the time, and I think there are serious issues that could be discussed in a more grown-up way, and it's this kind of Oxbridge kind of debating society feel to it. But, I'm also old enough, it's not like Labour's got the monopoly on this or any other party's immune from it. I remember Patrick Rock, who was a senior aide to David Cameron, being arrested not for being the friend of a paedophile, but on child sex offences he'd committed himself. So, it's not like any one party's got hands clean. But was he put into House of Lords? No, but he was working in 10 Downing Street at the time as a senior aide to the Prime Minister. I mean, that's quite serious. So, look, and there was Cyril Smith in the Lib Dems. I'm not trying to make I'm seriously not trying to make a partisan point, quite the opposite. I'm saying I don't think trivialising those sort of issues in that knockabout kind of way resonates very well with the public, in my view.
I completely agree, but I thought it was interesting the way Keir Starmer really seemed to be leaning into that today. He had obviously come
responded in kind.
Fully prepared with sort of personal brickbats that he was going to throw at individuals around the chamber. Somebody has said to Keir Starmer, this is how to do it. Get on the front foot, land an insult before they land an insult on you. So he's being more Punch and Judy than the others seem to be.
It's all around. And I think that sort of knockabout, when people are still struggling, look, unemployment's going up, homelessness is going up, the economy's stagnant, and the MPs are sort of just insulting each other in the House of Commons. I think most people would look at that and just go,
but John's had a good date, so, you know...
that's good for John.
John has to look at it every weekend, that's why.
Very quickly on that very point, though, the Prime Minister did rattle off those achievements he talks about from time to time. What was it? I think he said unemployment down, or you just said it's going up.
It's going up.
Interest rates down. He tried to get his backbenchers to join in there, pantomime style. But he did try and come back to those issues.
But, John, as Andrew points out, he'd done his homework, or someone had, because he had an answer to the Conservatives. He had, he's pointing to that hospital in Glasgow for the SNP, austerity for the Lib Dems. He was prepped. He may not have taken every question on, but he certainly had a different answer that he wanted to give, didn't he?
Yes, and he, it was, as I say, it was interesting the way he went for Ed Davey in a way that he hasn't in the past. Ed Davey, in some ways, has been sometimes is better. He asked the sort of questions that Kemi Badenoch ought to ask. I mean, I come back to the point that was it really the best issue to go on? OK, yes, you're right. I mean, coming after the Mandelson scandal, of course, I suppose that's what makes the Matthew Doyle story so pertinent, really, for opposition politicians. But the Prime Minister gave as good as he got, I thought, at Prime Minister's questions. And I do think that perhaps Kemi Badenoch missed a trick by not going on the turmoil, the plotting and the moves to get rid of him. I'm sorry, but...
But I suppose...
OK, it's Westminster soap opera, but politics, as a veteran political editor, a man called Ian Aitken, who worked political editor of The Guardian, once said, politics is a cross between a soap opera and a spectator sport.
There you go. A bit like this. Which brings me to the break. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up in a moment after PMQs, Keir Starmer met female Labour MPs and peers to address their concerns this afternoon. We'll hear about that next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Keir Starmer hot-footed it from PMQs to then speak to female Labour MPs and peers to address concerns there's been something of a boys' club inside his government. Our political correspondent Mari Aurora has been gauging the mood in Parliament.
The Prime Minister today meeting with the Women's PLP, Parliamentary Labour Party, and really wanting to show that he is taking seriously women's voices in his party and some of their despair, to be frank, compared to what we've seen over the past few days. Now, sources who were in the room tell us that the Prime Minister was listening rather than mansplaining, was understanding how serious this was and how we needed to listen to the women in the room and some of their huge concerns. And now we've been told that he's considering either having a standalone sixth government mission about tackling misogyny, violence against women and girls, discrimination against women, or whether to have it as an overarching mission for the government. And he said he's going to have a think about that, but nonetheless he wants it to be a priority. And MPs in the room, some are feeling positive. They're saying it's a good step forward. We're moving in the right direction. They believe the PM wants to see genuine root and branch reform and systemic change in terms of the way that the government functions and to get rid of what many have criticised as a boys' club. The difficulty is you speak to some other women who were in that room today and they're not necessarily quite as optimistic or quite as convinced. Some of them are sceptical about his commitment. They are tired of talk and they want to see action, and not only action, but they want to see action when it is difficult, uncomfortable, inconvenient, not only when it's convenient. And so there's been concern, several Labour MPs, female Labour MPs have told me there's concern that the Prime Minister is not listening to the women around him in his top team. And that was asked to him directly by a Labour MP in that meeting, whether he was listening to them and taking their voices seriously, because there was a concern that some of the top team of the Prime Minister, who were men, had been briefing against women, and that got a lot of support in that meeting. So the question is, can the PM follow up with concrete action, because some of the women in that room today are tired of all of the talk.
Mari in the lobby there. You heard from the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy earlier on. Well, I also asked her about the PM's address to female MPs and peers and what he needs to do, in her opinion, in terms of satisfying that element of the Parliamentary Labour Party.
Well, I'll say to you what I said to the Prime Minister, which is that we need to model the sort of culture in our government and in our party that we're trying to create out in the country. We need more women in senior positions of leadership. We need to end the misogynistic briefings against women at every level. I've been no stranger to them, but I think you would struggle to find a single woman in government who hasn't had to put up with that at one time or another.
Sorry to interrupt, but why do you think that's going to change now? Because you know when Labour politicians say we need to do X, Y and Z, people will say, you've had 18 months to do X, Y and Z.
Yeah, well, I do agree with that, and I do accept that. But I think this is a real moment of reckoning, not just for the Labour Party and the government, but for the whole political system, because, frankly, what the Epstein files laid bare was a system where very wealthy, very powerful men would look after themselves and each other, treat women and girls appallingly, with all of the disgusting revelations that have come out. Now, I think as a Labour government, we were elected to change that. We made ending violence against women and girls a central part of our manifesto, and we have wasted no time in getting on with that. But it isn't just about violence against women and girls, as serious that is. It's about power, who holds it and who doesn't. And you cannot be neutral on this, because that network of wealthy, powerful men was able to get away with it because people turned a blind eye. I mean, we've got to be proactive. We've got to root it out wherever we see it.
The discussion really this week has been about the power of the Prime Minister. Does he have the power to do that? Or have people been paying lip service towards that before the Gorton and Denton by-election that you've been working on, before the May elections in and around the country and in the nations as well?
No, I think he does have the power to do it. And the reason that he is in that job and the reason why the Cabinet rallied round and strongly supported him earlier this week...
Well, you were a bit slow to do that yourself. You were one of the last Cabinet members to
I'm not on
support.
it. So, I mean, I don't spend all my time sitting on social media. I wasn't slow, actually. I spoke to his acting Chief of Staff over the weekend. I wasn't slow at all.
Fair.
I think it
Slow
would have been
publicly,
a disaster.
but if you're not on X, then you're not on
But I mean,
X.
you know, we can't measure whether the Cabinet is rallying around the Prime Minister by who's quickest to get on a particular form of social media.
You can always tell us, of course.
No, well, I mean, you know, I'm very happy to give Sky an exclusive at any point in the future.
Please do.
But I, you know, look, we rallied round him because we believe that it's not just that he has a right to stay in the post. We believe that we all have a responsibility to deliver the change that is needed in this country, and he feels that very strongly, and he's right to do so, and he has our support.
Just a final question. This is a slightly broader question. As I mentioned, you're MP for Wigan. Straight talking, obviously. There are others that you will rub shoulders with in the Northwest, Angela Rayner being them.
She's pretty straight talking.
She's pretty straight talking. The Mayor, Andy Burnham, pretty straight talking. Aside from talking to the constituency of women in the Labour Party, does the Prime Minister need to listen to the North a bit more, the Northwest even, if you have a slightly different approach to politics?
Look, I'm really glad you asked that, actually, because I think, you know, having been no stranger to misogynistic, sexist briefings, a lot of them have been to do with me being from the North, and I've seen it levelled at Andy Burnham, I've seen it levelled at Angela Rayner, I've seen it directed towards Lucy Powell. Some of the briefings about me over the last year have been, she's never in the office.
I'm afraid we have to leave Lisa and Nandy there. We're heading straight back to Canada, to Surrey in British Columbia, in fact, where the police there are speaking about today's shooting.
Inform you as up to date as possible and to provide some information moving forward about how we will manage our communications. I'll just start with a review of the incident from yesterday. So, on February 10th at approximately 1:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Tumbler Ridge, RCMP received a report of an active shooter at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. A police-initiated public alert, PIPA, was issued as officers responded. Police from Tumbler Ridge RCMP and surrounding detachments responded immediately, with members from the local detachment arriving within 2 minutes of the initial call. Upon arrival, there was active gunfire, and as officers approached the school, rounds were fired in their direction. Officers entered the school to locate the threat. Within minutes, an individual confirmed to be the shooter was located deceased with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot. Suspect has been identified as 18-year-old Jesse Van Rootselaar, who is a resident of Tumbler Ridge. 2 firearms, a long gun and a modified handgun, were recovered by responding officers. Determining the origin of these firearms and what role they played in the shooting remains a significant part of the active and ongoing investigation. Multiple victims were located throughout the school, along with approximately 25 individuals with possible injuries. Once it was determined to be safe, officers evacuated over 100 students and faculty to a local community center, while police continued to assess whether any ongoing threats remained. Those with potential injuries were transported to the local medical clinic for triage and assessment, and 2 victims with significant injuries were transported to hospital via air ambulance. Following a medical assessment of the individuals, no discernible physical injuries were identified for those that remained at the scene. I'd like to correct some information that was shared yesterday and to clarify that 9 people in total are deceased as a result of this incident. Initially, it was believed that one of the victims, a female with significant injuries, who was transported from the scene by our members and then transitioned to paramedics, had succumbed to her injuries. Police have since confirmed that is not the case. She is alive and was one of the 2 female victims that were airlifted to the hospital. Both of those victims remain in serious condition. The deceased victims from the school include an adult female educator, 3 female students, and 2 male students between the ages of 13 and 17. 2 additional victims, an adult female and a male youth, were located deceased in the local residence. BC Major Crime Unit has assumed conduct of the investigation and is working to determine the full circumstances surrounding this tragic incident. There's been much speculation within the community regarding the relationship between the shooter and some of the victims. All of that remains part of the active and ongoing investigation. We are not in a position to publicly confirm any specifics at this time. Additional resources have been deployed to Tumbler Ridge to support both the investigation and day-to-day policing operations, which continue with the assistance of our neighboring detachments. BC Emergency Health Services, the Tumbler Ridge Fire Department, the local medical center, the school district, the community center, and many others within the community provided significant support throughout this response. Anyone in the community who does not need support, who does need support, is asked to go to the Tumbler Ridge Community Center at 340 Front Street. We understand the community has questions, and we understand they want to know the motive behind this tragic incident. We do believe the suspect acted alone, and there are currently no other outstanding suspects. Our investigators remain on scene, actively gathering information to determine the full circumstances of what transpired. This is a deeply distressing incident where 9 individuals have senselessly lost their lives. Thoughts with the families, the loved ones, the first responders in the greater Tumbler Ridge community, and all those impacted by this tragic incident. If you have questions, I'm prepared to take them at this time.
Officer Ramina Dea from Global News. Could you please expand a little bit on the suspect? Was he known to police? Were there any red flags regarding his mental health?
So a suspect is identified as an 18-year-old female by the name of Jessie. We have a history of police attendance and family residence. Some of those calls were partly related to mental health issues.
Could you spell the suspect's name, please?
Yes. The first name is spelled Jesse. The surname is spelled capital VAN, space, capital ROOTSELAAR.
Were the 2 victims found at the residence where the suspect lived?
Yes.
And why can't you elaborate on the relationship between the victims and in that residence? And
I can't elaborate on that. So it is believed the victims of that residence and the suspect are family members.
Can you say what parent, sibling, what relationship that is?
Yes, the female adult victim is the mother of the suspect, and the youth male is the brother of the suspect, or stepbrother.
Can you expand? You talked about a history of mental health with this female suspect. Could you expand on that?
I'll give you perhaps remaining some general comments on that. Police had attended that residence on multiple occasions over the past several years, dealing with concerns of mental health with respect to our suspect. I can say that on different occasions, the suspect was apprehended for assessment and follow-up.
So apprehended under the Mental Health Act?
Yes.
Taken to hospital?
In some circumstances, yes.
Any indication whether or not the suspect was receiving any help for their mental health situation regarding counseling, any of those services that are involved?
I don't have that information at this time. If the suspect was currently receiving care, I don't have that information.
And any of the interactions with police, did any of them have to do with weapons, guns in particular?
Yes.
Could you expand on that, please?
I will say that, again, not trying to be too circumspect, but police have attended that residence in the past, approximately a couple of years ago, where firearms were seized under the criminal code. I can say that at a later point in time, the lawful owner of those firearms petitioned that those firearms to be returned, and they were.
Were criminal charges laid in relation to those firearms?
So I'm from Westwood FYI Media. My question is, we've heard all around the world reports coming out from the different media, not local, but world, and we've heard people from Tumbler Ridge, actual people that know the shooter, and they are all saying that this person is transgender. Why is the RCMP not speaking to this? Why are we hiding this from them?
Well, first off, thank you for your question. We're not hiding it. In fact, you're the first media to ask the question. I will say this, we identified the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and in social media. I can say that Jesse was born as a biological male who approximately, the information that I have, approximately 6 years ago began to transition to female and identified as female both socially and publicly.
Unfortunately, we've heard a lot of transgender and mass school shootings. Do you think there's a correlation here?
It's too early to say whether that has any correlation in this investigation. I think it's important to recognize that this investigation is still in its infancy. We have seen still lockdown in school and residents while we execute search warrants and gather further evidence and talk to witnesses that may have further evidence for close.
How can you tell us about the website? I'm just wondering, can you tell me when these, prior to yesterday, last in contact with Jessie?
It's a good question. I probably have that answer somewhere here in my papers, but I believe we're there sometime last year.
But nothing in the last few days?
Nothing in the last few days, that's correct.
Okay, and you talked about the guns that were recovered. And can you say anything about who owned those guns, whether he had any sort of...
So I will say this, I know the guns are of significant interest to everybody. Part of the reason we haven't identified the specific models of the firearms or ownership is because at this point in time, our investigators continue to pursue those leads. We want to make sure that the information we do provide is accurate. We want to ensure that we can identify properly the ownership of the firearms, how they were procured, whether they were lawfully owned, unlawfully owned, whether they were manufactured, whether there could be any other parties to an offense that we are not yet aware of. So when we are able to release that information, we certainly will.
He was quite young. Did he have a license?
I can say that she had a license that had expired. I believe it was in 2024. She did not have any firearms registered to her.
Can you talk about, sir, any indication in the information you have regarding Jessie experiencing...
We'll leave that police press conference there, but we learned the name of the suspected shooter in British Columbia, Jessie Van Rootselaar, a trans person born as a biological male, transitioned and identified as a biological female. The police officer there said that's why they are talking about a she in that shooting, and also mentioned that the suspect, or the two people who were killed at a home, were the mother of the suspect and a sibling as well. Some more breaking news to bring you now as well. The American actor James Van Der Beek has died at the age of 48. His wife took to social media to confirm his passing. He'd apparently been battling cancer recently. Plenty of people will recognise that face from his time playing Dawson, the star of Dawson's Creek, back at the late 90s and early 2000s. But James Van Der Beek, who famously played Dawson and had other roles, of course, has died at the age of 48. You are watching the Politics Hub. We're going to return to our discussion now around Keir Starmer and the week he's been having. Andrew and Daisy are still here with me. Andrew, before we were moved on to other stories, we were hearing Lisa Nandy talk about how Keir Starmer has been addressing women in the Parliamentary Labour Party today. And unlike his address to the wider PLP the other day, it wasn't as unanimous in its support today, let's put it.
No, well, that was a private meeting, and although the PLP nominally happens behind closed doors, it's packed with journalists outside, so that, you know, it's a performance, you know, and there is every kind of MP and peer is allowed to attend it, so therefore everybody knows everything leaks that you say in there. So these sort of private meetings in Downing Street, and I understand there was a similar one yesterday as well, take on a different tone. And I think it's interesting what Lisa Nandy said, and I've heard it from others as well. In fact, we heard it in opposition, actually, when Morgan McSweeney was Chief of Staff before. Sue Gray came in, that it was too much of a boys' club in Keir's office.
Yeah.
And that accusation has definitely been levelled over time. But you also got to remember, we've got the first female Chancellor in this country's history. We've got a woman Foreign Secretary, we've got a woman Home Secretary. You know, 3 of the 4 great offices of state are held by women. So in some way, whether he listens to them enough is a different matter. Whether their judgment is any better than his is another matter as well. But, you know, I think part of the problem, I think the bigger problem, and maybe it's a bit dangerous for me to say this as a man, but maybe another problem at least, is that it's just too factional. He doesn't listen to a broad swathe of opinion within the party.
Yeah.
He doesn't listen to the unions. He doesn't listen to backbenchers on either wing of the party. He's very top-down in his style, and I think that has contributed to a lot of the mistakes you've seen, a lot of the bad decisions, and then the U-turns, because he hasn't really consulted people.
There is something instinctive that I don't like about this idea of, I'm going to go and talk to the ladies, and then they'll see... And I know that's really unfair, because what else is he meant to do?
Yeah.
But there's something in me that doesn't like it. And the fact that he was saying, you know, I am a feminist, I'm a feminist ally, and then people were saying, well, there's a vacancy at the moment for the first secretary, which was the job that David Lammy had, and you know, a woman hasn't had that for donkey's years. In fact, Peter Mandelson had it way back in the day. And people are saying, you know, give that job to a woman and then everything will be OK. And it just sort of doesn't address the real issues.
It's not a real job either, first secretary.
It's not really a real
thing,
job, so it would feel a bit tokenistic.
Yeah.
Having said that, Morgan McSweeney has been replaced by not one but two women, so that's good. You know, the head of the civil service is rumoured to be going to a woman for the first time, Antonia Romeo. So there are changes afoot, but it feels a little bit, to some of the conversation, not the actions, feel a little bit tokenistic.
So maybe it needs to be more of a sort of wholesale attitude change. And I don't know if you caught at the end there, we obviously had to break off from that interview with Lisa Nandy and head over to Canada, but she was answering a question I made about listening to not just that constituency of MPs being female, but other constituency of MPs in the north, in the northwest. To which she said, I'm glad you asked that question, because we feel that way. Politics clearly is done differently in different places, the North West being a prime example.
Well, I think if you look at some of the mistakes they've made, they've ended up suspending people from the whip for voting against the two-child benefit cap. Then they scrapped the two-child benefit cap and admitted those MPs were actually right to begin with. Similar on the winter fuel allowance. Then you had it around the planning laws and the disability benefit cuts. They suspended 4 MPs instead, and then actually ended up having to take their position. With no humility, no, oh, sorry, we overreacted, sorry, we suspended you from the whip. It was, you didn't agree with us, you're out. And that attitude, whether it applies to male or female MPs, I think is very damaging, actually. And the Tory party did it with Johnson, you know, when he purged about 19 or 20 MPs just before the 2019 elections. So it's a problem.
This desire and the desire to, you know, look very tough and be macho and be, you know, be the big boss and have everyone scared of you. And the other thing is, you know, this does all come back to Epstein. The Mandelson stuff all comes back to Epstein. And you know, the voices that were silenced were women's voices, which obviously is why, you know, women are particularly, hackles are particularly raised over this issue.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Andrew, just to finish off, you know, consulting, listening to those different voices takes time, and they haven't got time. Maybe it takes even more time to have a U-turn and sort out the mess of that U-turn.
But I think that's right.
How are they going to speed up this process? They've got to listen to, get some sort of consensus across the party before they...
I think you have an ongoing process of it. You know, it can't just be, oh, we've made a mistake, we better now stop and listen to people for a bit, because you make mistakes. And as you say, when you make mistakes, you have to change policy, you look silly, you've had your MPs going out there defending a policy, and then you change it, and now they've got to defend something else. And it undermines morale. So actually get it right the first time, consult with people, get a coalition. Sometimes you as a leader, part of leadership is having to compromise, not just getting your own way.
The first test of that might be the forthcoming white paper on special educational needs for children, which is a lot of people are waiting for. Maybe they won't use it.
And jury trials, I think, is another one that's going to come to a head as well, scrapping, you know, or reducing the amount of jury trials.
I think that'll be the next U-turn.
I think a U-turn on that.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. The uncertainty surrounding the Prime Minister's future is sure to feature heavily on our late-night programme tonight. The Wrap, it's on at 10, of course, here to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers. Will be the FT's associate editor and columnist Stephen Bush and the Sun on Sunday's political editor Kate Ferguson. Now, it seems Nigel Farage has his sights set on the hallowed halls of Downing Street, but his partner, Laura Ferrari, says if she ever finds herself in the role of Prime Minister's significant other, she'll take a much more low-key approach than many of her predecessors. Speaking to the Driven Women podcast, Ms Ferrari said that she doesn't think people want spouses to be too involved in politics, but other wives and husbands of those in the top job have taken a bit more of a front-facing role, forward-facing role. Keir Starmer hasn't shied away from highlighting his wife Victoria's career in the NHS. You'll see that in a second. Carrie Johnson had a high-profile time in Number 10, from claims about her influence during the COVID pandemic to what was dubbed Wallpapergate. Meanwhile, the billionaire heiress Akshata Murthy's non-dom status meant Rishi Sunak's wife's tax affairs were never far from the headlines. There she is. And Sir Philip May was reportedly his wife's most trusted advisor. While the first male spouse of a Prime Minister, Dennis Thatcher, referred to his wife as the boss. Of course she was. And of course, it's not just here. First Lady Melania Trump has recently had her very own documentary made, courtesy of Jeff Bezos' Amazon. So let's bring in the duo for this, Andrew and Daisy. What do you think, Daisy? Does Nigel Farage's significant other have a point, stay in the background, or are they thrust into the limelight whether they like it or not?
Of course they are, and in fact, going on from our last conversation, there is still so much sexism because we're normally talking about women. Of course, notable exceptions like Philip May and Dennis Thatcher, and it's normally about what the woman looks like, what she's wearing, you know, is she pretty, all of this stuff, which has often been very, very insulting to a lot of these women. But some of them, men and women, have been amazing behind the scenes. I mean, Dennis Thatcher, you can't get much better. You know, he did the whole thing, said he was married to the head girl, would throw in these deeply inappropriate, you know, funny comments, and down a gin or five, and that's how he got through it. So, you know, I think he set the bar quite high. Cherie Blair had a huge amount of criticism about all those things I was saying before, how she looked, how she spoke. She was too much of a career woman. You know, all of that was so unfair. But of course it's a big role. It's an influential role.
What do you think, Andrew? Because, you know, they may not want to do it, but we were talking before about how, obviously, the leadership has become more presidential. So do we have a sort of de facto first spouse?
Yeah, maybe we do. I mean, I think the thing is politicians play into it, and I think male politicians sometimes want that. I mean, at the end of every politician's conference speech, who comes up on the stage to give them a hug? It's their wife. Well, partner, but more often than not, as you say, Daisy, it's their wife. Now, you know, at the end of this programme, we're not going to bring our spouses on and pose at the end of it. It's a very weird thing to do when you're at work. Suddenly
My wife would no way do that in a million years.
No, mine is probably, if she's watching, she's probably not. Because I'm on. Would think that's absurd.
But you know why that happens.
Yeah,
it's because
you want that image of, oh, he's a family man and all this nonsense.
Exactly.
And that is it's very outdated, I feel, and it should be, because we're judging them on the basis of their politics, their decisions, what they're like at running the country, not do they look like they love their wife, because everyone can put on a brave face and do that, and let's face it, most of them have been putting on a brave face.
I am going to have to put on a brave face and say thank you both very much indeed. As much as I'd love to discuss this more, and visions of families in Downing Street walking out, skipping out, and then you suddenly see the real picture of what they were like at home. Gordon Brown in particular rings a bell. Good to see you both. Andrew, Daisy, thank you very much indeed. That's it from us for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, the UK Tonight with Sarah J and me, of course. Bye-bye for now.